The first file I'm going to get ready for importing into the toolbox is my ozone data file. And my ozone data file is a comma delimited text file. Now remember that just because my ozone data file looks like this does not mean that your ozone data file is going to look like this. Your ozone file might look completely different, but I'm trying to show several different types of files and the way to manipulate each of those files to get them ready to import into the toolbox. I have on my desktop a folder called Analyzer Raw Data, and this is where I put the raw data that comes off of my sampler. And these are the files that I do not manipulate because they are my original files from the sampler, and you never want to manipulate those. So you want to start by making a new folder on your desktop, and that folder is going to be for files you manipulate for importing into the toolbox. So I'm going to start by making a new folder. I right click and I select new, and then I select folder, and I'm going to name this Toolbox Import Files. And now I'm going to go into my Analyzer Raw Data and I'm going to copy my ozone file. So I right click on it and select copy, and then I close this and I paste it by right clicking and selecting paste in the Toolbox Import Files folder. So I want to rename this file because I don't want two of the same files with the same name on my computer, because I don't want to get confused over which one is the file I'm manipulating. So first I make sure I'm in the Toolbox Import Files folder because I don't want to change the name of the file in the other folder, because that's directly from my analyzer and I don't want to change anything about that. So I am going to, after confirming Toolbox Import Files, I'm going to right click and I'm going to select rename. And I am just going to name this manipulated site S46 ozone. So I'm going to click right in front of the S there, and I'm going to type in manipulated. And then I'm going to press enter on my keyboard. And now my file is renamed, then I won't get confused over which one I am manipulating. So I'm going to double click on this file to open it to see how it looks. So this is how the file looks. And I notice that it's a comma delimited file. And when I say delimited, what that means is what separates each column in your file. So in this file, I have the date here, and then I've got the time here. And you'll see right here, there's a comma between those two. So that's what separates my columns, and that's why I call it comma delimited. So I found that the best way to get these files ready for importing into the toolbox is to go through the checklist that's in the last page of the SOP for a toolbox ready file. And I've already done that in the notes document for this module. So I'm going to show you the notes document. And I went to the part of that notes document where I filled in the checklist. The first item in the list, it has to be a comma delimited text file with the file name of newimport.txt. So I checked this off because it is a comma delimited file. I haven't renamed it yet as newimport.txt, but that's something I'm not ready to do that until I import it into the toolbox. So I've checked that off just because it is a comma delimited file. The second item in the list says that unique headers, or column names, have to be shown for each column. So if you look at the top of my text file here, you'll notice that there is no column names. It just starts with the date. So there is no column names in this file, and that's something I need to fix. So I left that as being not checked off. And then next, data begins in row 2. Well, no, data begins in row 1. And the reason for that is because I do not have any column names in this file, so my data begins in row 1. So that's also unchecked. No blank rows. So let me scroll through this using my vertical scroll bar here. And I don't see any blank rows of data, so I check that off as being complete. Okay, number 5 contains complete dates in common date format or serial date format and times with each time in a new row. That's true, there's a date and a time, and each time is in a new row. So I check that off. And number 6 is that the concentration or parameter data, so parameter data meaning met data, like for example, precipitation, relative humidity, etc., has at least 1 digit after the decimal in the first row of data for non-integer data. I know that my concentration data is in the 3rd row, so I confirm that there is a value after the decimal place, so that is checked off. Contains a known and logged in your database logbook number of records. I don't know how many records are in this text file yet, so that I did not check off. Number 8, have a backup copy named and saved elsewhere. I do have my original data file, site s46_ozone.txt, and it's saved in a different folder, and I make sure I'm manipulating the manipulated site s46 file. Number 9 is has to be saved in the Tribal Data Toolbox version 3.0 folder on your C drive. I'm not yet ready to import this file, so I have not saved it there yet. And when I move it there, then I can check that off. So looking back through my list, what don't I have checked off here? Okay, I need to add headers. Once I add my headers, my data will begin in row 2, so that will be done. And I need to know how many records are in the file and save it in the Tribal Data Toolbox folder, but I'm not ready to import this yet, so that will be done when I am ready to import. So since I don't have that many changes I need to make to this file, I can go ahead and make these changes in my text file. If there were a lot of changes you needed to make, you could import it into Microsoft Excel and make the changes there. Or if you just are not comfortable working with the text file, you could also import it into Microsoft Excel. And we're going to demonstrate that with another file, but not this one. So I'm going to go into my text file. And the first thing I need to do is I need to add my column names. So I consult my manual for my sampler. So the first column I know is a date column. The second column is a time. And the third column is the concentration. So to add the column names, I need to make sure that my cursor is right in front of the first row of data. So I click on the first row of data, and then I press enter on my keyboard, and you'll see that that made a new blank row at the top of my text file. Now I move my cursor into that blank row by clicking in it, and now I need to type in my column names. So when I type in my column names, each of them need to be separated by a comma. And the reason why is because this is a comma delimited file. So that tells the text file that each column is separated by a comma and each column has a separate name. So the first one is date, and then I type the comma, and that tells the text file that I'm going to the next column, and that next column is time, and then comma again, and then my concentration field. And I also gonna put in the units because that was specified in my sampler manual. And now I have my column headers in the text file. Since I have my column names in the text file, that also means that the data begins in row 2. I could check off item 2 and item 3 in my checklist. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. Okay, the next thing I need to do is I need to know the number of records or rows in the text file. So to find out the number of rows or records in a text file, you go to View and you select Status Bar. If your View menu does not have this option of Status Bar, or if it's not selectable, you need to go into the Format option and uncheck Word Wrap, and that will make that become ungrayed out. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Status Bar. So now what I need to do is scroll to the very end of my file, and I need to click in the last row of data. And when I click in the last row of data, you'll see over here the line number. So it says it's line 337. So what that means is that there's 337 rows in this text file. So we know that that top row is the column names. So in terms of actual number of data records, we would subtract 1 from that. So there's a total of 336 data records in this text file. So I need to record in my database logbook that there are a total of 336 records in the manipulated site s46_ozone.txt file. There's also some additional things that I would recommend recording in your database logbook, and I would also record the start date of the text file. So at the top of the file, we'll see that it started at August 8th, 2013 at 9 in the morning, and it ended at August 22nd, 2013 at 8 in the morning. And it's good to record this in your database logbook so you know what each of your files contains. Also, I know that from my sampler's manual that these are end times, and what that means is that 9 o'clock is when the sampler ended. So that means that my sample actually began at 8 o'clock. But I'm going to record in my logbook that these are end times, and those are what's up. So 9 o'clock end time and 8 o'clock end time. And I'll record that in my logbook. I also like to record the units of my data in my logbook. So I record that the units of my concentration data are in parts per billion, ppb. I can now check off item 7 in my checklist. So go ahead and do that. And I am now ready to save this file because the only thing that remained unchecked was item 9, and that's moving the file to the Tribal Data Toolbox _version 3.0 folder and renaming it as new import.txt. So I'm just going to save this file by clicking File and then Save. And that file is now ready. When I am ready to import it, I can move it to that file and rename it. So since the file is saved, I can go ahead and close it, and I'll do that by clicking on the X button.